Okay, this fourth panel is titled Real Recovery. And I had a panelist ask me what is meant and what is real recovery. Because it sounds like a branded name in some type of curriculum, but it isn't. It is simply a way to speak about recovery and how recovery really impacts and touches people, and the real true meaning of how do we allow people and move people to change their lives, hence the root word of recovery, right? So on our panel is Tony Strong-Pratt, Rachel Watts, Elisa Shaw, I stand corrected. Newton Gentry was here, is no longer here. He was here earlier today. And we have Latoya in Congolo. Congolo. Oh, Congolo. I don't say the N, sorry. This is shameful.
It's okay, it's okay.
And so this particular panel talks about everyone's path to recovery and how everyone's path is different, right? Obviously. But it also talks about how real recovery should offer specialized treatment. And we made a point of putting specialized treatment for males, females, women with children, and also those who identify as transgender. Because the other intersection that we see in all of the stuff we've been talking about is how do people navigate these particular systems when they are marginalized from the outset. So something to think about on the real recovery piece, but also keeping in mind that everyone has different lived experiences and varying degrees of sobriety. So without further ado, I offer you our fourth panel. And can you all take 90 seconds each to kind of frame where you're coming from? I wasn't going to say who you are, but that's an existential question. So.
Okay. My name is Latoya Congolo, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker and licensed clinical drug and alcohol counselor. I'm the co-owner of Work-Life Behavioral Health and Professional Training located in Glen Burnie, Maryland. I'm also an adjunct faculty professor at Anne Arundel Community College in the Addictions Department. And I guess where I'm coming from today is really to help you all understand from a clinical perspective what recovery entails. So I will give you a basic 101, and I'll also be open to answering any questions you may have.
I'm Rachel Watts. I'm with Crisis Response. I do the Safe Station program in the county, here in the city as well, and I'm a licensed social worker. I do come from a mental health background, but I've been doing the Safe Station program for 2 years now, so I do have a lot of experience with the aspect of mental health and dual diagnosis.
My name is Elisa Shaw, and I am the housing director with Serenity Sisters. So I am able to work with men, women, and children, kind of transition from treatment into, I guess, being a productive member of society. And I am a person in recovery. I have about 4.5 years sober. And I'm kind of here, I guess, to give my opinion of what recovery looks like to me.
My name is Tony Pratt. I'm compassionate, I'm passionate, I'm strong-willed, I'm determined. And what I do is I work for Delegate Alice Kane. I'm also a community advocate. I'm also the co-founder of a support and codependency support group called Desire. And I'm also a child of God.
All right. Tony is trying to surprise you all by starting off really soft. Did anyone else notice that? Really soft-spoken and measured. I'm like, what's happening here? This is called a sneak attack, a surprise attack. So, as we said with Real Recovery, we wanted to focus on not only, we talked a lot about barriers today, but we want to talk about recovery and equitable recovery. So what does that look like? Speak for a few seconds on that.
Sure, I'm sorry, Will. So I want to start with, I guess, to answer Elisa's question. She said, what is real recovery? I will give you the SAMHSA definition of recovery, and the SAMHSA is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Administration. So SAMHSA defines recovery as a process of change through which individuals improve their health and wellness, live a self-directed life, and strive to reach their full potential. So when you hear that definition, I think any of us can relate to that. Every one of us here, at least we should be, striving to live our full potential and live a self-directed life. I think that, for all of us, if we're honest with ourselves, we've all had a struggle, or we all are still struggling with something. So in a sense, we all are in recovery. But when we're talking about mental health and substance use disorders, the recovery is very intense. It's like a full-time job. Recovery consists of a variety of activities that this person is going to have to do concurrently in order to be successful in recovery. In early recovery, a person is very vulnerable to relapse. And when I talk about relapse, I'm not talking about just picking up the drug and the alcohol. I'm talking about relapse on mental health symptoms as well. So when we use the term relapse, we need to apply that term to both mental health and substance use disorders. When a person is not taking their psychotropic medications, they are at risk for relapse. When they are isolated, if they are depressed, they are at risk for relapse. If they haven't changed their people, places, and things, they're at risk for relapse. So these are the activities that we need to encourage people to do, whether it's our family members or those that we serve, and they need to do these things on a consistent basis to be successful in recovery. I also want to talk for a minute about PAWS, which is post-acute withdrawal symptoms, okay? PAWS is real. When a body has been damaged by toxic substances, it takes at least 18 to 24 months to heal. Our central nervous system is out of whack, and it needs time to repair itself. So in early recovery, a person is at high risk for relapse because their mood is unstable, they're irritable, they're feeling depressed, they're feeling anxious. And these are the symptoms that need to be managed by professionals. It needs to be managed through medications. It needs to be managed through individual and group therapy, support groups, peer support. I heard someone mention peer support earlier. And also in an environment that's conducive to recovery. And I know I saw Angel earlier, so I'm sure you all are very familiar with recovery housing. But these are all the activities that need to be incorporated in order for recovery to be successful. And I'll stop there and I'll pass it on to the other panelists.
Real recovery. So I asked that question because I'm not sure. So as a person in recovery, I'm not sure what real recovery looks like, because recovery is just recovery. So for me, being a person in recovery, what it means to me is like being a productive member of society, showing up to work on time, like living, I don't even know the word that I'm looking for, not doing the things that Angel was talking about in neighborhoods, not causing ruckus or of being of hazard, and being able to help another person in recovery or outside of recovery, being able to show up. It can mean a lot of things. So in addiction or in recovery is an everyday battle. Every day. And any day that I decide to give up is a day that I could die. That's just what it is. We all see it. We all know what's happening today. So I think recovery can mean a lot of things. Depends on who you are and what your goal in life is. But I know for me, it's just, am I saying something I'm not supposed to be saying?
No, I don't know what that is.
So I mean, just being a productive member of society and showing up and being a good person. I usually say, I just try to be a better person than I was yesterday, today. That's what recovery kind of is for me. Oh, you have your own mic.
So real recovery for me is being at a healthy state of mind, because for me everything starts in the mind. So in order to be in a good place of recovery, I have to be whole in my mind, because really that's where everything starts. So relapse, before we even do anything, the thought comes. So it starts in our mind. So my recovery starts with my thoughts, everything that I need to do, the things that I'm thinking on, the things that I'm not thinking on. But my recovery also consists of being aware of my surroundings and what triggers me. For me, I talk about the family piece. In the communities where I live, in the communities that I help service, there is no family recovery piece at all. When I'm a codependent, right? I'm recovered because I'm in a healthy state of mind right now, but at any moment that can change depending on where I take it, right? So when I was codependent to my husband. I've been clean for 25 years. I didn't know I had a problem, right? I didn't know nothing was wrong with me. First of all, I never did a drug in my life. Never drank in my life. But I was sick, right? I didn't know it. Somebody invited me to Nar-Anon. And when I went to Nar-Anon, I sat in those rooms and the lady looked at me and told me, "You're just as sick as your husband." And I left and I never came back. Because how could I be sick? I've never done any of this. But I was going to the crack houses. I was staying up all night, making sure he was safe. I was calling his job when he didn't go to work. I was giving him money when I knew he was using money for his drug. So guess what? I went to any lengths to keep him good. Just like the addict goes through any length to get the drug that they need. I was once told that I wasn't the one personally affected. I beg to differ, because I still have sustaining problems from being a codependent. Anxiety from staying up all night, not knowing if he was dead or alive, is real. So when you tell me that I wasn't the one personally affected, I think you need to check that statement. So for me, recovery is taking care of the whole family unit, because we can't send an addicted, recovering person back to a dysfunctional family.
I think for me, recovery is what everyone was saying, is just so different for each person, whether it's from mental health, substances, the family. And I think my role for what I do is the recovery starts when they make that decision to stop and to come to a fire station or to come wherever. And I think that I try and hone in on that thought process with the person when they come in, and then just encourage them. We have peers that work in our office, and getting them linked with a peer and start that process of where that person has been and where they can go. So I think it's just so different for each person, and I would love it to be individualized. But like Jim said earlier, that's just not a thing. But yeah, okay.
So thank you all. So in terms of recovery, and as we are currently speaking of recovery, how effective do you think because Angel talked about the continuum of care, but so when we talk about recovery, how much does it wrap around the reality of people's lives?
So, well, how effective it is, I can tell you that, I spent quite a few years of my career at Pathways in Annapolis. And I remember the counselors often telling the patients that only 10 of you are going to make it. Only 10 of you are going to make it. I don't like that statistic. I don't like that number, because it's not true. Because I tell people, if you do all of the required work that recovery entails, 90%, at least 90% of you will make it. So the system is very effective, but it takes for people to utilize the system, to take advantage of all of the supports that are available to them. The supports we have available today were not available to us 20 or maybe 30 years ago. What I learned about addictions when I went back to get my addiction specialty degree, I did not learn the same things back in 1996 when I started in this field. So there are a lot of effective treatments, but it really takes for that person to be committed to the recovery process in order for it to work.
You said you needed me to reword it?
Yes, because I didn't quite understand what you were.
That happens a lot. So Angel talked about the continuum of care.
Correct.
So I'm relating that to when we talk about real recovery,
Okay.
as that may have something to do with how a person receives treatment, their road to recovery, right?
Okay.
Like how they're able to do that. Like what are some of those things that contribute to real, healthy, true recovery?
Let's see. So I remember being in rehab and hearing the statistics, and they would tell you in treatment, you can look to your left and look to your right, but only out of 3 of you, only 1 of you is going to make it. And I remember being in treatment and being like, oh, that's going to be me. Like that, I'm going to be that one. And I can tell you that statistic is not true, because there are still people that I was in rehab with almost 5 years ago that are still sober, that have not relapsed, that are still doing this. And I think a big part of that is having a network. So having a family that supports you, having people that are also in recovery that are doing the same thing that you're doing. Because there's a saying that says, if you hang out in a barbershop long enough, you're going to get your hair cut. So if you get out of treatment and you go and you hang out with the same people that you were using with, you're going to continue to use. So you need to be around people who support you, who are doing the same thing that you're doing, that you have the same path. So I know for me, maintaining a connection with my own higher power, going to meetings, like collectively working on myself, because it starts here. So for me, like my disease, however you want to, doesn't tell me like you need to go get high, you have to drink. Like that's not what my disease tells me anymore, because I've done enough work. My disease tells me that I'm not good enough, that there's no reason why I should be sitting at this table. That's what my disease tells me. So every day I have to work on myself to stop it from here before it happens here. So I think hopefully that answered the question. I'm not sure, but
You answered. I don't qualify to answer that, because again, you are speaking of your experiences and where you're coming from, and so for those of us that don't share your exact experience, we're learning.
Okay.
So you're teaching us. So thank you for that answer, Tony. I think you want to.
I think the continuum of care works if we have equal and equitable access to it. If we put the people and systems in place where they are not in place, and we actually stay the course, I think it works. I think what happens when it breaks down is, first of all, the person who's in it breaks down, but then the system around that person breaks down. For instance, I want to use the safe house, for instance, and to talk about equal and equitable care. When the safe stations first came out, the safe stations was called the heroin and opioid safe stations. Well, I had a problem with that, because I had people in my communities who needed help who weren't doing heroin and opioids. They were doing crack, but they needed help. So I called the firehouse, I called the president, I said, look, we need to sit down and have a conversation, because we need to change this name. If we want all people who are having issues with addiction to get help, then we need to start with changing the name. Thus, Safe Stations' name was changed to Substance Abuse Safe Stations. So I said all that to say, if we aren't being equitable and equal about how these systems are providing care to people, that is not having the consortium of care that we need. In our communities, for instance, harm reduction equipment, harm reduction access is not available at all our communities. It's a breakdown. Harm reduction, recovery. Recovery includes all that. As we said, it's individualized. We don't know which point each person is at. But if we don't have the access they need when they need it, that's just a deterrent from the recovery process. So I think if we identify what places need what and actually put it there, I think we can get better results in this recovery. But the person has to be ready for recovery. So it starts with the person. And it doesn't matter how you get ready. Because my husband went into recovery not because he was ready, but he was court ordered. But when he got court ordered, he came face to face with himself. And I thank God for that court order. So it doesn't matter how we get in or how we start. It's all about how we finish.
I just want to add something. So in the drug and alcohol community, we say we live in Anne Arundel County. We also call it AA County, okay? So the reason why we call it AA County, because here in Anne Arundel, we have more 12-step meetings in this small radius than anywhere in the region. So there's a lot of recovery here. But I want to just touch on the 12-step meetings and the whole AA-NA community. How many of you are familiar with the term 90 and 90? Okay, somebody shout it out. What is 90 and 90? 90 meetings in 90 days. And the reason why we recommend that is because it takes about 90 days for us to be consistent and develop a good habit. Whether it's eating right, whether it's exercising, it takes approximately 90 days for those good behaviors to stick. So in that 90-day period, a person's recovery should include going to meetings on a regular basis, finding a sponsor, finding a home group, getting a support network, collecting phone numbers, making coffee if they need to in the meetings. But they need to be doing this on a regular basis for that habit to stick. So when I say 90 meetings in 90 days, I also want to tie that to when I talked about the central nervous system repairing itself and post-acute withdrawal symptoms. Post-acute withdrawal symptoms peak at 3 months. How many months are in 90 days? 3. So you got 3 months of your symptoms being at their worst. When you're feeling your most depressed, you're most anxious, you're out of your head, you're irritable. Those symptoms peak at 3 months, but if you're going to 90 meetings in 90 days, by that 90th day, you should have a shield of armor around you, protecting you from yourself. Because that's when most people relapse, is that 3 to 6 month period. And the reason why they relapse is because they have not consistently done the recovery work. So when we talk about recovery in Anne Arundel County, keep in mind we're in AA County where there's a robust of recovery.
I think to bring it back to the systems of care, what I see in my role is a lack of aftercare planning from the treatment centers. So whether that's IOP afterwards, or really the big one is mental health appointments after treatment, that just is non-existent, unfortunately, in here. And I think the 12-step meetings are wonderful, but that's not for everybody. So finding out whatever their plan is with their counselor in inpatient treatment where they are safe is where it needs to start for their aftercare planning. And I think that needs to be pushed a little bit more in treatment centers. I think there needs to be more mental health counselors in addiction treatment centers because most of us have both. So I think it's very important to, when we're talking about the continuum of care, it begins while you're in treatment. So.
All right, so I want to take this opportunity to, we've been so lucky for this entire day to have so many amazing panelists and attendees and everyone, but we also have another amazing person. I'm a little biased, but she's our councilwoman, Rhonda Pendell Charles. Can you want to say hello to anyone? So I'll shamelessly plug what you focus a lot of your energy on, because she has worked tirelessly in particular in the parole area on health issues, providing access to health with the Parole Community Center. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that, but she's done a lot of work to be sure that families and communities have access to health care. So she joins us in this fight, and thank you for being here today. So moving off of what both of you were talking about, I've always found this really, really interesting in a lot of personal experiences as well as others. The fact that the interaction and touch points that are changed based on gender in certain experiences. So when you talk about recovery and you talk about your journey, a lot of times it's framed by men who are the ones who make the decisions about who gets what, when, where, and how. And that's not always the case, because we have someone like Angel who won't let that happen all the time. But tell me about the experiences based on gender that you feel are either experiences that change that experience or make that experience just tougher or better. Or...
I'll go first this time. I think from what I see is that there are so many male beds for treatment. What about the ladies? Like it takes so much extra work for a female to find a bed at a treatment center. And I just don't understand it, because there's so many females out there that need the same exact help, or there's more male recovery houses. Like, I think for me, from a provider looking out, that's what I see as the issue at the moment.
I think for females, at least for me, we deal with it longer because we feel like we can handle it. And the males are the ones that are reaching out. I think it's wrong that we don't have the female recovery beds as much as we have the men. But I just don't. I think women stay out longer. I just do, especially in our communities. They just stay out there longer. They use what they have to get what they want, and they just usually stay out there longer. In our communities, they're not really seeking treatment.
So when I was working on my social work degree at the University of Maryland, we did a study on genetic risk factors for substance use disorders. And what we found is that genetically men are more likely to develop an addiction. And that's for a variety of issues, related to genes, traits. But the other thing that we found too is that not only are men more likely to develop an addiction, men are more likely to receive a charge based on, the aggression that comes along with being intoxicated. So they're more likely to enter the system through the criminal justice system, where they would domestic violence, bar fights, et cetera, which is usually what will lead men into treatment. Women, on the other hand, one thing, this is all studies, this is not just me speaking as a woman, but statistically, women are usually halted by their addiction is usually halted if they have children or if they are a caretaker or in a nurturing role. So they usually are less destructive with their substance use versus men. So you see more men in treatment, you see more recovery for men because there are more men who are dealing with a destructive type of substance use versus women.
So that was interesting. That study's interesting. And I always like data, right? Because data is what is reported. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the unreported data. Because you talk about the data that shows that the men are more destructive. But I would like to invite you to some of the places that we serve so that you can see the unreported data and what the women are doing and how destructive some of the women are and why nobody is paying attention to that. Women are crying out. Women are becoming just as destructive. And I wish somebody would do the unreported data, the data that doesn't come through the system, the numbers that doesn't come through the system, the on-the-ground data that we're missing, that we could get a better hold on this thing if we would look at the part that isn't being reported.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I asked that question, right? And it's weird because you all are obviously at this table, happen to be all, and I thought to myself the difference between a more clinical conversation or a more robust conversation about things not attached to what are considered, because I think part of the data that you brought out is the not having a support system, but being the support system for multiple people, right? And it's a generalization, so I'm not saying that that's something that comes along with gender or being a woman, but it's really interesting in the conversation that we had. I was also taking it, the question I also wanted to add on to that was when we talk about, there's the equity side of it, and and it shows through studies how they land there. But I was interested also in saying, is the system, how difficult is real recovery for a woman? Would you consider it more, less, or kind of doesn't matter because it's a personal experience, or what would you say?
I think it's more difficult because they have all those other components. They have the children. So, okay, if I go into recovery for 30 days, who's gonna take care of my 3 or 4 kids? Who's gonna make sure that, if you're living with your parents, or who's gonna make sure my bills are paid? If you're a single parent. So they have other things to really think about before they go into recovery, whereas the male can say, look, I'm just going, your mother will take care of you or whatever. But we have other extenuating circumstances to think about before we actually say, okay, I'm okay enough to go, even if I'm mentally unstable, even if everything around me is out of order. I have to make sure that everybody else is okay before I can go and get okay, right? So that's part of my disease. I'm a codependent. I need to make sure you okay before I'm okay, right? So we don't all the time understand that they are not okay if we aren't okay, because we help make them okay. But if we're messed up, they're messed up also. So a lot of those extenuating circumstances that we have and the responsibilities that we have stop us from seeking recovery as of a male.
So to touch on a little, so yes, everything that she said, yes. So with my experience in working in the, so I haven't been working in the field as long as everybody else. I'm not licensed. I don't have any letters behind my name, none of that. But I can tell you that in the experience of living in a sober house and a recovery house, and now working for that same recovery house, I can tell you that I don't know why, I don't know what the statistics are, and I don't know what happens, why it happens this way, but the men tend to stick and stay, as the women who they rotate a lot. And I don't know if it's because of the family, because of the kids, because they have to go home, because I know for me, if I didn't live somewhere, if I didn't go somewhere that wasn't dysfunctional, that had support and a foundation, there was no way I would be where I am today. So to move somewhere away from your kids, away from your family, with no job, no vehicle, it's very stressful and it's very hard for somebody who's coming into recovery. And I'm not, that's the, first time in recovery, never been to treatment, just moved into a recovery house the first time, I'm not talking about relapse, the first time of trying to start the recovery process. It is very overwhelming and stressful, and I think women we're more hard on ourselves sometimes when we can't provide for our family, when we can't show up, when we can't do this and we can't do that. So, and I think the men are just, no offense to the men in the room, I think some of them are just I'll take care of that later. It's fine. So I think there is a lot of the men and women, and I don't know why. There's even there's different rules for men and women in recovery houses for almost every establishment. I don't work in treatment, so I'm not sure, but there is different rules, and men have to go by different standards than women do in recovery.
So I wasn't picking on you, and I didn't mean to say that loud in the mic.
Yes.
It went really close to
Why are you yelling at me?
It's late in the evening. I wasn't picking on you, but I'm dovetailing it into the conversation you and I had before about real recovery. But also I'm thinking about your involvement with Serenity Systems. And I'm saying that because there's power in that, right? And the power in it, when we talk about peer-to-peer, but we're also talking about colleagues and having a shared vision and understanding what people that are impacted by this are going through. There's power in that. So that's why I brought up the gender thing. It was in no way to say women depend on men, and it's none of that. It's to say that is a powerful thing. Would you agree?
Yeah. No,
Right.
I agree. Not even just, as a whole,
Right.
not even just in recovery, but as a whole. that's a whole nother subject, but
No, it's the same thing.
I mean,
Good, go ahead.
but so no, so it is definitely a big thing as a whole. So I agree with you, yeah. And I didn't think you were picking on me. I swear.
Okay, no.
And Will, I'd just like to add too that, you know, as a therapist, I see a variety of people from all walks of life. But even with my women, you know, if I could just tell you based on my experience, I have more women who come into therapy sessions with their babies. And I have to, you know, deal with crying babies in a therapy session. You know, they have those distractions, and a lot of it is if they're in a caretaking role. And it makes it difficult to focus on your recovery. You know, I have to work a little harder with women to help them identify meetings where they have babysitting. You know, or just, you know, some of those things that could be barriers to them actually putting themselves first. It's hard as a woman, first of all, to accept that we need to be a little selfish with our time and we need to focus on our own issues. But when you have those barriers that, you know, where you have other people relying on you, it does make it a little more difficult. And it just means that we as a community have to be willing to work a little extra harder to help them stick to their recovery.
Okay, I'm trying to elicit questions or comments also. Okay.
Hi, my name is Lori, and I identify mostly as the parent of an adult who has addiction. And I've been active in the community for a couple years, and my biggest thing, and the only person I really had heard it from anybody was Tony, was talking about the families. And that's always my question, right? So what do we do, right? Do we go, the resources are there, but you really have to look for them. And I oh my gosh, I don't know. There's so many things that the families don't know. And when your person comes back from treatment, right, how do you help them? As a parent, all you hear is enabling, don't enable. Well, what the hell does that mean, right? I don't know, define it, right? Because for some people it's support. So my question is always, where are the resources for the families? How do we help our person? Because detaching with love is not for everybody, right? Because again, you have to define that. And what I think is lacking is education. It's education on what addiction is, and what my thought of what recovery was and is for my kid is not what her idea is, right? So it's taken a couple years, but I got there myself because I don't feel in the city or the county the resources are there to help the families. Okay, I'm done on my soapbox, thank you.
There's no soapbox. There's no soapbox at all. That was a good ending to that, because you do have people in this room who spend their time trying to connect the dots on exactly what you're talking about. So you need to meet. Do you know Mr. Drummond?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, that's what's up.
I just want to piggyback on that a little bit. I have experience working for a private psychiatric hospital, and this was specifically for a population that didn't have to worry about what private insurance was going to cover. So the system was very robust. There was a week-long evaluation process with many tests. If they had inpatient treatment, it was 6 months long, include everything from a dietitian to spiritual counseling. Then after treatment, they had a reentry program where a support group was formed back where this person was from. A meeting was held with one of the clinicians from the center to talk about what reentry back into their life was going to be like. The person would have to come clean with what they were treated for, what their history was, and what the expectations for their behavior and what they were going to be doing after the treatment was. Plus then they would have to continue going to counseling and meetings when they were back in their community. And then coming back to our psychiatric hospital once or twice a year for 5 years afterwards. But the big thing that this doesn't take into account is our treatment models now, which is all profit driven. This was very effective treatment because it was holistic and it involved family and involved people back where they were from to help them re-enter after the treatment. So
I think personally what for me is I found Nar-Anon on my own, basically. Still now, even a lot of family services aren't openly given out in our communities, or we can readily put our hand on it. Every now and then you can go online or go on Facebook and see LaToya offering the family class or something, but the education is key because I didn't understand a lot of it. I didn't know what enabling was. I didn't know what addiction entailed. I didn't know how I was, detrimental to him and he was detrimental to me. So I had to understand my part first. So in understanding my part, I started to learn about his part, how he was affected and how I could best serve him. And for me, it was going to the Nar-Anon and then a 12-step program. But what really helped me on my path of recovery was my faith. Because I know if the 12-step program left and everybody who was helping me left, I needed something that I could stand on. And it has been and will be and always will be my faith. It was not a piece of paper, it was God. That's why my husband and I started a support group to talk about codependency, which is the family component, and addiction together so that we can know how we affect each other. We freely talk about God and anybody's other faith that they have. But I don't want anybody to not think that their faith is not important. Because when everything else fails, you have to have something to stand on outside of every 12-step, every person who's in your life, because people will fail you. The 12 steps will go away sometime, but your faith will always be there. So that was my plight to recovery, and probably my only plight, because if I didn't have my faith, I probably would have lost my mind with what I had to go through. Because we changed people that we're codependent to. It was my husband first, but then it became my kids. But then I had to find out where the root came from. And the root was birthed in my childhood with my dysfunctional family. So the spirit was already in me. It was just waiting for the spirit to connect with me. And that was my husband.
Thank you. All right, thank you. We have another question, but LaToya.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to just answer Lori's question. So she was asking about resources for family members. I do a family wellness workshop at Pathways, and this workshop is held every first and third Saturday of the month. I will be there this Saturday, so I welcome all of you to attend. It's a full day comprehensive workshop. We start at 8:30 in the morning, and we give family members a thorough understanding of what addictions and co-occurring mental health disorders look like. We also talk about recovery for the family. We offer the family communication techniques and tools to use to support their family members, but more importantly, the support that they need for themselves is what we touch on, and that's key. So if you're available this Saturday, you do not have to sign up. You can just walk in. We offer free breakfast, free lunch. But if you want to look at future dates, if you go on aahs.org, AnneArundelHealthSystems.org, you'll find the dates to register for future workshops. The other thing that I've been working on, maybe for the last 2 to 3 years for the state of Maryland, is I developed a full 21-hour curriculum on family peer support. So we talked about peer support, where one person in recovery helping another. This curriculum really focuses on family members helping one another, because we recognize if the family member is still sick, then they're not going to be equipped, or they're not going to be effective in helping their loved ones in their recovery. So if you go on www.mapcb.wordpress.com, you'll find the dates for those family endorsement trainings. And we train on advocacy, we train on mentoring and education, recovery and wellness. So I would just encourage you all to please consider some education and services for yourself.
Okay, thank you. We have one more question, and then we have to wrap it up with our recommendations.
Super quick, just a comment tangential to what you guys are talking about systemic barriers for women across the board. I just recently heard, and this is a little off topic, but recently heard a woman speak from Reproductive Justice Inside. And just last year before, in the state of Maryland, we had to pass a bill that a woman could labor and have a child without being handcuffed and would not be put in isolation. And we had to pass a bill that would allow a woman to have more than 4 sanitary napkins a month, which, by the way, is still not happening in the state of Maryland. So these are very interesting things that you're saying about the barriers to women getting treatment because of childcare, because they might be in that sandwich generation taking care of a parent as well as a child, and then who is going to pay the bills, right? Yeah, they don't just magically happen. So this is a whole systemic issue of how we treat women in this country in general.
So I want to thank you very much, and thank you, Sharon, for that. So we're going to wrap this up with our recommendations. I want each of you to give a recommendation that we can track and put into our paper so that we can elevate those and make it real. So give a nanosecond to think of, even if it's a little bit of what you all talked about on your panel in terms of recovery, what we mean by real recovery. I do think we drew out of the conversation a gender piece, which to me is incredibly powerful because it seemed to resonate. So even something where we are paying more attention to kind of women's issues, I do also throw in transgender and throw in, that entire area that we probably need to pay more attention to. So, what side do you all want to start? I know we're gonna go on forever. Pardon?
I just want to add a recommendation.
Oh, of course. So can she kick off the recommendations?
Absolutely.
Okay, kick them
Because
off.
I didn't hear medically assisted treatment as included in recovery on this panel, and so I just want to make sure that that
Just to include medically assisted treatment in recovery. The young lady stated, I'm not sure what real recovery is either, and if you could define that, that'd be great, but it is individualized, and so, there are many paths, so I want to include all of the paths.
Thank you. I wasn't sure if that was a rhetorical question when you said about real recovery. You're not sure what was meant by that?
No, honestly, when I saw the agenda that said real recovery, I didn't
That was the trick. Is real recovery is an individual endeavor, and it has to meet the person where they are. So only you can, the individual can do that. So the other is recommendations. What side would you all like to start on? Well, I'll let you just handle that yourself.
Okay, education, I think is one that we talk about all the time that needs to be continued. I don't think we're getting into the neighborhoods enough. I think that's a big part of it, if we could actually go to the neighborhoods and meet people. I know Captain Edwards does a lot of that, and I think you do a lot of that as well, maybe? And I think that would be a really good one to do. And the stigma, of course, that's always another one. She talked about medicated assisted treatment. Well, some people don't believe that that's being sober. So really, what does your recovery define, if that's something to think about as well? Some people have a little bit of judgment on that.
Okay, I want to thank you. I want to remind you all they're being tracked and written down. So as you frame them in a way where we're going to wordsmith, of course, and totally change what your recommendation was.
Okay.
But because
Here's my
there's a lot of people
recommendation.
here,
Okay. At least 80% of people with a substance use disorder have a co-occurring mental health disorder. So my recommendation would be, if a person is in recovery from substance use disorder, they must be in recovery from mental health disorders. They need to follow up with a psychiatrist, with a therapist, in combination with anything they're doing for their recovery on the substance use side. And I'll give you an example. Let's say you're working with someone who has alcoholism, but they also have depression. This person is going to AA meetings, they have their sponsor, they're doing all that great work, but they're not seeing a therapist, they're not taking any antidepressant medication. What are the chances that they're still going to be committed to going to meetings, they're going to be motivated to call their sponsor if they're having a down day? What are the chances of that? Slim to none, because those depressive symptoms are going to interfere with their recovery for their alcohol use disorder. So my point is that if they're only focusing on one disorder, they're going to fail in their recovery. So mental health and substance use disorders must be treated concurrently.
Thank you. Did you get all of that? Because I have it. I remembered every word. Okay.
I think we should have mental health clinicians directly for substance use disorders, directly for those people and families as part of their continuum of care. What was the other one? I also believe that we need to have satellite mental health facilities in each neighborhood.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, I have one. I got it. So everybody's recommendations are great recommendations, and I'm not sure if mine is a recommendation, but I think communication. Just different facilities or treatments or IOPs, clinics, communication, like all across the board with everybody. About everything, everywhere. I think there's not a whole lot of communication.
I got one more thing. Equity.
When you say communication, you mean between the caregivers?
Correct. Yes. So from treatment to IOP to recovery housing to the hospitals.
And also communication between government agencies.
Yes.
Yeah, just everything, everywhere. Communication. I don't work in facilities, but that is the one thing. Every meeting that we go to, there's times where people have laughed at me because I'm like, there's no communication anywhere about anything ever. So I think communication.
Thank you. So
I have
with
one more
that,
thing before you start.
we have a limit of
Just
5
real quick.
per person.
Make sure that everybody's path is rehabilitation and not criminalization.
All right.